In a quiet small town, Anya and her daughter Leah lived together in a modest but cozy apartment. Anya worked as a restaurant waitress, leaving early and returning late every day. Despite the grueling work, she always wore a smile. She often told Leah, "No matter how hard life gets, as long as we have each other, there's hope." Leah, now 20, was a student at an ordinary university. Her delicate face often carried a maturity beyond her years, a mark left by life's hardships. On weekends, Leah would take on part-time jobs, like organizing shelves in a bookstore or serving coffee in a cafe, hoping to ease her mother's burden and save up for her future. Though life was difficult, Anya always strove to create a warm home for her daughter. She loved ending a busy day by cooking a steaming bowl of soup for Leah. The two would sit at their small dining table and chat about Leah's studies, her friends, and dreams of the future. But whenever the topic touched on Leah's father, Anya's expression grew complicated. She would simply say, "He was just a passerby." Leah, understanding and considerate, never pressed for details, though she harbored a deep curiosity and longing for the father she had never known. Leah enjoyed reading romance novels, dreaming of the passionate love stories they depicted. She hoped that one day she might meet her own Prince Charming. However, harsh reality reminded her that her life was far from those fairy tales. She carried both the hope for happiness and a vague unease about the unknown. In this simple yet resilient life, the bond between mother and daughter was like a steady stream that nourished their souls. Yet neither of them knew that the shadow of fate was quietly approaching, ready to change everything. On a sunny weekend afternoon, Leah received an invitation from her friend Karine. "There's a high-end party tonight. Come and check it out." Leah hesitated. She had never set foot in such a setting before, but Karine persisted, saying, "Just come and see. No need to be nervous. You might meet someone interesting." Driven by curiosity, Leah agreed. The party was held at a luxurious villa on the outskirts of town, where lights glittered and music flowed gracefully. Dressed in a borrowed gown from Karine, Leah followed her inside. The spacious hall was filled with elegantly dressed guests, chatting and laughing. Leah felt a bit out of place, a stark contrast to the confident and poised people around her. Just as she stood awkwardly in a corner, unsure of what to do, a deep and magnetic voice spoke up. "Would you like a glass of champagne?" Leah looked up to see a strikingly handsome man with a tall, well-built figure, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit. He smiled as he handed her a glass of champagne, exuding an air of confidence and elegance that was impossible to ignore. "I'm Kyle," he introduced himself, "Kyle Walton." Leah stammered out her own name, her gaze unconsciously drawn to his compelling eyes. Kyle was the founder of a renowned tech company in the city, a young entrepreneur who had quickly risen to the ranks of the wealthy elite. His conversation was both humorous and charming, effortlessly dissolving Leah's nervousness. Kyle not only complimented her unique charm, but also shared intriguing stories that made her laugh out loud. He guided her through the crowd, introducing her to important figures, as though opening the doors to an entirely different world. As the party wound down, Kyle invited Leah to dinner. Driving a luxurious sports car, he took her to an exclusive private club. In the softly lit dining room, Kyle ordered a rare vintage wine and attentively listened as Leah talked about her life. He expressed admiration for her resilience and said, "Someone like you deserves a better life." Kyle's warmth and attentiveness made Leah feel an unprecedented sense of being seen and cared for. She almost forgot her own modest circumstances. Yet there were moments when Kyle's seemingly flawless demeanor faltered, his vague remarks and avoidance of certain topics hinting at an air of mystery. This unexpected encounter seemed to open a new chapter in Leah's quiet life. However, the truths hidden behind the luxury and charm were quietly waiting to be revealed. Leah gradually realized that Kyle was not only a successful entrepreneur, but also a man of exceptional charm. He always knew the right words to say at the right moment, making her feel uniquely cherished. Kyle's confidence and attentiveness captivated her, and she found herself dreaming of a beautiful future together. One weekend, Kyle invited Leah to his private villa, perched on a hilltop overlooking the city. After dinner, he took her hand and led her to the terrace. Under the glittering city lights, he whispered softly, "You're the most special person I've ever met." Those words melted Leah's heart completely. That night, she felt a sense of happiness and belonging she had never experienced before. However, Kyle was not telling her the whole truth. While he showed Leah his romantic and gentle side, he deliberately concealed his past and the complicated realities of his life. To Leah, Kyle seemed like a man worthy of her lifelong trust. To Kyle, their relationship was driven by purpose and calculation. He carefully played the role of the perfect lover while hiding a trace of anxiety deep within. A few months later, Leah noticed subtle changes in her body. At first, she didn't pay much attention until one morning, a sudden wave of nausea alarmed her. Nervously, she bought a pregnancy test from the pharmacy. The result was clear. Leah was pregnant. When she shared the news with Kyle, he reacted with surprising composure. Though his tone was full of care, his eyes flickered briefly with an emotion too complex to decipher. "This is such a surprise," Kyle said warmly as he embraced her. "We'll face this together." Hearing this, Leah was moved to tears. She believed Kyle was beginning to take their future seriously and even started dreaming of the day she might wear a wedding dress and build a happy family with him. However, Kyle's thoughts were far from serene. Leah's pregnancy was as unexpected as it was inconvenient. From the beginning, this relationship had been part of a carefully crafted plan, and he had never intended it to progress to a life-altering stage. He began devising ways to keep everything under control, ensuring that Leah wouldn't doubt his intentions while preventing this situation from interfering with his other commitments. On the surface, Kyle continued to shower Leah with affection. He accompanied her to prenatal appointments, arranged for the best nutritionist, and even suggested a trip abroad to help her relax. Immersed in the sweet atmosphere Kyle created, Leah's hopes for the future grew stronger. She naively believed her life was about to begin a blissful new chapter. Little did Leah know that behind Kyle's calm demeanor lay a brewing storm. A more significant scheme was taking shape, and she remained completely unaware that she was falling deeper into a carefully orchestrated trap of love. One afternoon, Anya was tidying up Leah's room when she stumbled upon something that sent a chill down her spine. While cleaning the nightstand, she found a men's watch. The design and craftsmanship were all too familiar. It was the exact model Kyle always wore. Anya froze, her mind swirling with confusion. She tried to convince herself it was just a coincidence, but the growing unease in her heart wouldn't subside. Determined to uncover the truth, she decided to investigate quietly. A few days later, Anya seized the opportunity to check Leah's phone while she was out. She scrolled through the messages and stopped at one from Kyle. "Babe, I've made reservations for tonight. I can't wait to see you." Anya felt her entire world collapse. Kyle, the man she had once loved and now despised, was using the same tactics to lure her daughter. Meanwhile, Leah stumbled upon hints about her mother's past connection with Kyle. One day, while at home, she came across an old photo album and discovered a faded photograph. In it, her young mother stood beside Kyle, their expressions warm and intimate. The discovery left Leah confused and uneasy. Searching further, she found an unsent letter in her mother's drawer. The letter contained Anya's raw, anguished words directed at Kyle and revealed the truth about Leah's father. More than a decade ago, Anya was a young woman full of dreams, working as a waitress at an upscale restaurant. One seemingly ordinary night, she met Kyle, then a charismatic and ambitious young entrepreneur. Kyle, with his dashing looks and magnetic charm, pursued her with fervor, promising a bright future together. He made her feel cherished in a way she had never experienced before. The two quickly fell in love. Kyle introduced her to a world of luxury, taking her to high-end venues that seemed like a dream. However, beneath Kyle's seemingly perfect exterior lay a hidden truth. His business was in its infancy, teetering on the brink of financial collapse, and his promises of commitment were little more than empty words. Not long after, Anya discovered she was pregnant. With a mix of joy and nervous anticipation, she shared the news with Kyle. To her surprise, his reaction was far from the delight she had hoped for. Kyle remained silent for a moment before offering vague reassurances, urging her to wait and see. In the days that followed, he grew increasingly distant, finding excuses to avoid her. Eventually, Kyle vanished entirely. He changed his phone number, moved away, and disappeared, as if he had never been part of Anya's life. It was then that Anya realized she had been nothing more than a fleeting chapter in Kyle's story. Now, with a life growing inside her, she knew she would have to face this new reality on her own. In her despair, Anya made a resolute decision. No matter how difficult it might be, she would bring this child into the world and give her all the love she could. She relocated to a new city and began her life as a single mother. After Leah was born, Anya never spoke of her father. She told others that Leah's father had passed away, not only to shield her daughter, but also to bury her own painful memories. But fate seemed to have its own plans. Years later, when Kyle reappeared in Leah's life under a completely different guise, Anya initially failed to recognize his true intentions. Was Kyle's return merely a coincidence? Or did his magnetic charm mask a deeper, more calculated motive? The answers awaited in the near future, ready to unravel. The truth began to surface. That evening, Anya and Leah finally sat face to face, discussing Kyle openly for the first time. Anya's voice trembled with pain as she recounted her past with Kyle and revealed Leah's true parentage. Leah was devastated, unable to comprehend that the man she loved was the one who had abandoned her and her mother. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" Leah's tears flowed uncontrollably, her voice filled with despair and anger. Anya, equally heartbroken, sobbed, "I only wanted to protect you. I didn't want you to get hurt." The two embraced, their hearts shattered into pieces. But Kyle wasn't one to let things spiral out of control. Sensing the tension, he boldly came to Anya's house to confront the mother and daughter. His demeanor was still calm and composed, but a trace of menace lurked in his gaze. "Things have gone too far. No one will believe your story now," he said coldly. "I can give you everything you need, but only if you keep quiet." Anya suppressed her anger, clutching Leah's hand tightly. Her voice was firm. "Kyle, we've had enough of your manipulation." Leah, on the other hand, looked lost, still processing the cascade of revelations. Kyle, noticing her hesitation, tried to sway her with sweet words. "Leah, I love you. This is all a misunderstanding. We can start over." At that moment, the weight of fate's cruel blow plunged mother and daughter into unbearable pain and chaos. Meanwhile, Kyle's shadow loomed over them like an unshakable net, binding them tightly in his grasp. The living room was tense, the air thick with confrontation. Kyle stood before Anya and Leah, his face steely, while Anya's eyes burned with anger. Finally, unable to hold back, she shouted at Kyle, "What do you really want? Why are you destroying us?" Her voice trembled, but every word was sharp, cutting deep into Kyle's pretense. Kyle tried to maintain a calm facade. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone. Anya, this is all just a misunderstanding." Yet his tone betrayed an insincerity that was hard to ignore. Anya, no longer suppressing her emotions, stepped closer and jabbed a finger at his chest. "You ruined my life, and now you're destroying Leah's. What's your true intention?" Leah stood to the side, tears streaming down her face, her eyes full of unease and helplessness. Her heart was torn in two. On one side was her love for Kyle, and on the other was her trust in her mother. But with every word Kyle spoke, her hope crumbled further. Then emotions erupted all at once. Anya shoved Kyle, her teeth clenched as she spat out, "You won't control us anymore." Kyle's face darkened immediately. He stepped forward, grabbing Anya's wrist with such force that she winced. "Anya, calm down," he growled, trying to suppress the chaos, but Anya struggled even harder. In their tussle, Anya lost her footing and fell, her head striking the edge of the coffee table with a sickening thud. Time seemed to freeze for a moment, and Leah's scream shattered the silence of the night. Anya lay on the floor, blood seeping rapidly from her head, staining the carpet crimson. "Mom!" Leah threw herself to the ground, her trembling hands cradling Anya's face, but her mother's gaze grew distant and unfocused before her eyes finally closed. Leah's cries filled the room, raw and unrestrained, while Kyle stood nearby, his expression a complicated mixture of shock and barely concealed panic. "This was an accident," Kyle tried to steady Leah's emotions. "Leah, you have to believe me. I didn't mean for this to happen." His voice was low and coaxing as he crouched down, even reaching out to comfort her. But Leah's eyes turned icy, and she pushed Kyle's hands away with a sudden burst of fury. "Don't touch me! You're a monster!" she screamed. Kyle stared at Leah's reaction, realizing the situation had spiraled out of his control. He began calculating his next move, trying to salvage the wreckage. In a hushed voice, he said, "Listen to me. We can fix this. No one has to know." There was a subtle threat in his tone, alongside the manipulation he had so often wielded. But Leah's resolve hardened. Trembling, she pulled out her phone and dialed the police. Kyle tried to stop her, but Leah took a firm step back and said, coldly, "Come any closer, and I'll tell them everything." The sound of sirens pierced the night, growing louder with every second. Kyle's composure crumbled bit by bit, while Leah knelt by her mother's side, her expression vacant. The man who had once radiated confidence and charm now stood under the harsh lights, disheveled and defeated. Leah, facing the devastating weight of her fate, was left with nothing but unrelenting grief and despair. The sound of police sirens pierced through the night as Kyle was taken away by officers. Leah, on the other hand, sat by her mother's lifeless body, numb with grief and tears long exhausted. The investigation moved quickly, uncovering evidence on Anya's phone and in their home that pointed to Kyle's deceit and manipulation. Leah provided her testimony about the confrontation and her mother's tragic death, with all signs indicating Kyle's responsibility for the tragedy. However, the path to truth and justice was fraught with obstacles. With immense wealth and powerful connections, Kyle hired a top-tier legal team and discreetly bribed key witnesses and officials. His lawyers crafted an elaborate narrative, portraying Anya's death as an unfortunate family dispute rather than a result of Kyle's malicious intent. When the trial began, what should have been a pursuit of truth turned into a bitter display of injustice. Kyle's lawyers relentlessly attacked Leah's credibility and dredged up Anya's past to tarnish her reputation. The prosecution, under-resourced and overwhelmed, struggled to counter the defense's manipulative tactics effectively. In the end, Kyle was convicted of unintentional negligent behavior and sentenced to 1 year of imprisonment, suspended on probation. He accepted the verdict with a detached demeanor, as though he had anticipated it all along. Meanwhile, Leah, seated in the courtroom gallery, felt her world collapse as the judgment was read. Her mother's death had not received the justice it deserved, and Kyle continued to walk free in this world. Leah clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms, yet she felt no pain. Outside the courthouse, she stood in the biting wind, gazing at the bleak sky. Her mind was filled with memories of her mother's laughter and Kyle's lies as silent tears streamed down her face once more. A few days after the court's verdict, Leah packed the last remnants of her belongings. Among them was an old box filled with her mother's keepsakes, fragile yet weighty memories that carried Anya's love and pain. On the morning she left her hometown, sunlight poured over her weary face. Each step away felt like treading on the edge of an abyss, but she knew she had to go. As the train slowly pulled out of the station, Leah sat in a corner, her gaze fixed on the scenery rushing past the window. Her mind replayed images of her mother's smile, Kyle's lies, and the tragedy that took everything from her. She repeatedly asked herself why justice couldn't prevail over evil, why the truth was drowned by wealth and power. But there were no answers. Life in the new city was far from easy. Leah worked multiple jobs just to scrape by. She threw herself into work, hoping that constant busyness might numb her pain. But when night fell and she sat alone in her cramped apartment, flipping through photos of Anya, tears would still silently stream down her face. Even so, Leah never gave up on her pursuit of the truth. She began studying law, driven by a desire to advocate for those who, like her mother, had been silenced. She didn't want anyone else to endure the suffering they had faced, and she dreamed of one day exposing Kyle's true face to the world. Standing at the starting point of her new life, Leah took a deep breath and looked up at the sky. Sunlight broke through the clouds, warming her face with a faint, reassuring glow. She understood that while the past could not be changed, the future was still hers to shape. Justice might be slow, but she was determined to spend her life chasing it. This was both an end and a new beginning. Carrying her mother's love and her unyielding quest for the truth, Leah moved forward, knowing the road ahead would be long and challenging.